Hello, this is John from PebblePad. In this short video, I'm just going to give you a little insight into some of the features that are contained within Flourish. What I'm going to do is just guide you through some of the main areas of Flourish first, and then give you a little bit of a live demonstration of this system. Now, it's a system we're incredibly excited about because we feel that it offers that vital connection between the learning area and the assessment area, and it allows the conversation that typically happens between a learner and the tutor or the mentor or the coach or manager, the opportunity to flourish, the opportunity for dialogue to occur, the opportunity for tasks to be set, and then for follow-up discussions. So I'm just going to walk through some of these key areas right now, and then show you a few features of the system. So what is Flourish? So first of all, we believe that learning is best defined when it's guided. It's guided by a person who can assist, make sense, allow a user to make sense of things that are happening in their lives, in their course, in their workplace, and that can help then reveal aspects of somebody's achievement or development and his successes. It's also about understanding how that journey is progressing, and therefore it's important for these people, these guides who are working alongside somebody, to be able to allow that person to make sense of the journey that they're going on, to understand things that have happened in the past around experiences or skills that they've had or knowledge that they've learned. Make sense of that and be able to then process that and review it and apply it in the future in a meaningful way. It's also about having a dedicated space where all of that information can converge and be available for both parties to be able to review it and to be able to then use all of the elements to build up a conversation. It's also important that other information can come into that space. I've mentioned here around the co and extracurricular. This is sort of the lifestyle additional features that happen to all of us that aren't necessarily maybe in somebody's own course or research or in your day-to-day job. These are the other things that happen that actually are still incredibly important about how you as a person are developing and can use these features in the future in terms of your own self-development, but also maybe also progressing and developing maybe as a course progresses. So what does Flourish look like? Well, I've just pulled out a screenshot here, and there's several key features here. The first I'll just mention is that this is a new design, overall design for PebblePad, and that it's entirely HTML5 and responsive, so it can work on a whole range of devices as well as desktop computers and Macs. But let me just show you some key features as well. The first is about timeline views. So as you can see in here, we've got tasks and pathways and milestones, but there could also be conversations and meetings and thoughts all contained in there, and it could be a timeline of your own, or it could be a timeline that you can view as somebody's tutor or mentor, and then you can go into it, review it, and then start a conversation or respond to a post that's been included. We've also got actions, and this is where once you're on your timeline or somebody else, you can trigger those activities. It could be a task that you set, or the meetings, the conversations and thoughts. It's also very important as a user so that you are kept up to date with things that you have to do and things that have happened in the past. It's also useful if you are a tutor or a mentor to be able to see for yourself what's going on, your own personal alerts, but also if you go into a other person's timeline, you can see things that are relevant between yourselves, and therefore you can understand the things that are important and happening at the moment to that other person. And finally, those group facilities within Flourish. So it could be a one-to-one group between, say, a tutor and a student, or it could be a one-to-many. So there could be a research supervisor and lots of research students, and those can be packaged up together in these groups. So here we have an example of a pastoral team and a coaching team. So let's look at a couple of perspectives here, and I'm going to choose an academic perspective, but it could be several others that could be adopted. So first of all, this is a typical sort of example of a tutor and a student. This is some kind of relationship that can grow throughout the duration of a course. Now, as we all know, there is a conversation that occurs between these people, a dialogue around how the student is adapting to a course, how they are learning most effectively, how they are making sense of the grades that they're getting, and the other elements of feedback. And the tutor is trying all the time to use the information that they're receiving back from the student to then allow them to grow as learners and to enjoy the course, but also get the most out of it in providing useful feedback that can structure and scaffold their learning in a useful way. But how do we capture all of this information? Because at the moment what we see is that there are lots of things that happen in that relationship between the tutor and the student. And I've highlighted some of these in here. Some of them are sort of a two-way sort of correspondence around meetings and reflections and conversations. But there can be other information that's being fed back to the student. So the feedback, coursework and grades. Now Flourish can do all of these things and allow all of these things to be recorded in the one space. And particularly elements like grades can be pulled out of maybe a student information system or a learning management system and be available in that timeline so the tutor can go in and see a student's grades and then be able to have a really useful conversation with them. Let's just look at a program perspective as well. Now in a program there can be multiple tutors and many students, and often those students are clustered into groups, and the tutor might be expected to meet with a group on a regular basis. But as we all know, each of those members of the groups are individuals. They have their own learning needs, they have their own problems from time to time, and it's important that the tutor is able to understand those and to find the right ways to communicate in a timely way. So we have developed Flourish so that communication can happen incredibly efficiently. So the tutor can have conversations and meetings and set activities for groups. But equally, when they are about to meet with a person or they are meeting with a person, they have all the information that's relevant in front of them to allow them to have the most constructive conversation possible. There are also some practical perspectives to the structuring of these conversations in Flourish. For example, these students may have two tutors, and these two tutors are providing feedback all the time to these students. So the students might want to have that information all stored in one place, rather than having different forms of information being fed to them from different sources. Equally, if this tutor is providing feedback to these students, then this tutor might also want to know what that feedback is, so that they're fully informed, so that when they meet with the students, they can not be duplicating information, not missing anything out either. And then quite often within academic departments, there is a role for a lead tutor, and the lead tutor is responsible for the way that the tutoring system runs, for the processes and activities that happen within it, but also for supporting the tutors in tutoring the students. So they can provide the extra level of support to their tutors, particularly in times of need when students are having problems. It may also be that sometimes some student says, well, I haven't actually seen my tutor for several months and I haven't been able to correspond with them. And so the lead tutor will be able to look through Flourish into the way that the conversations and meetings are happening, and be able to get a better picture about whether meetings are happening regularly enough. If we look also from a student perspective, as we all know, students come across many different people, all offering advice and information and feedback throughout maybe 3 or 5 years of a course. Now, how does that student make sense of all that information and keep it available for them to be able to use when it's needed? Well, Flourish allows all of the different personalities and roles who a student comes across to be able to interact with that student throughout the duration of a course, maybe even beyond. And what we can see in here are a range of different individuals, from year tutors, personal tutors, module leads, placement supervisors, if there's such thing for a student, clinical tutor if it's a healthcare based course, and then dissertation supervisors and even a careers advisor, somebody outside of the mainstream course, but somebody who is another figure. And there could be multiple other figures involved in the student. And so it's about the student being able to have good, effective communication channels, but then also having a single repository of information. Finally, from these perspective views, let's just have a look at a curriculum. And here I've just mapped out a simple first year of a typical academic course. And what we can see in front of us is things like pre-induction activities. So things around before a course starts, maybe about introducing yourself to your tutor and to your colleagues. Maybe it's about a little bit of understanding about how you're going to study. So maybe through lectures and through practicals and laboratory sessions. But then moving into the welcome week, this is about orientation and getting to know each other, and maybe a little bit of work just around the course. And then moving into modules and activities and breaks and exams. And what I've included here is some course-based competencies. So they could be year-long or course-wide, maybe graduate attributes or other sort of clinically based skills that the student is expected to complete and store and reflect upon as they progress through a course. There's also these co- and extracurricular activities, and these are things that often sit alongside a mainstream course, and often it's very difficult to record these, provide evidence of them, and also then share them with others. So Flourish is designed for all of these things to be included in the same place. So this is a vitally important feature, which means that the tools that are available in Flourish can map against a typical course structure and allow all of these interactions to be recorded. So for example, what we can see in here are, in the yellow blocks, meetings that may be scheduled, for example, at the end of the welcome week. It could be around at the end of a semester. It could be following exam results, these red blocks. And these are times when a personal tutor or a personal mentor might typically be arranging to meet with a student. But there is also the opportunities to have deeper conversations around set tasks, which could be tasks that the tutor is setting for a student. And these can be included within milestones. And the milestones are units of aggregates of tasks which are entirely up to the tutor or course leads to define. And they can have deadlines, and they can have the prerequisite that tasks are completed in order for the milestone to be passed. And then we also have a pathway. And the pathway can include multiple milestones. And what it allows then is a sequence of activities, maybe scaffolding towards some level of achievement, to be recorded in one place. So how does a tutor make sense of the kind of work that's being completed and a task or a milestone or a pathway? Well, these analytics are included in a screen such as one in front of you. So you can see in here, this is myself as a tutor, and I've distributed a task called SLE Review. This is a supervised learning event. So I'm asking students to complete a form, a Pebble Plus form or template, and just include some reference to some event where maybe another figure has reviewed what they've done, and just describe that, provide a little bit of reflection on it and how they made sense of that as an event. And I can see in here I've got 5 submissions, 3 haven't started, 1 is in progress, and 1 has been completed. So as you can see in the colour chart at the bottom, for the people who haven't yet started it, what I might be doing as a tutor is saying, okay, well, there's 2 weeks to go before the deadline, so I'm going to just send an email to these people and just remind them that there's a deadline, and they might want to be thinking about starting something. If they haven't already started, are there any issues that they've got? Do they understand the task properly? Are there any barriers? For those who are in progress, maybe just a little cajoling, just check that they know when the deadline is, and again, just check that they're on target for completing. And for those who've completed, and hopefully all of them will be completed by the deadline, it's about giving them some feedback on whatever they submit, and then using that feedback and that knowledge of how they've addressed that issue to either then maybe create a conversation in Flourish or set a meeting in Flourish for either the individual or the whole group, just to then start to sort of use your role as a tutor to provide some general advice and guidance and get them to think about what they're going to, how they're going to use that information that they've stored to build upon their learning and how they might experience other events in the future. So I've talked very much around a sort of a higher education academic perspective, but who else can use Flourish? Well, hopefully by now, whatever role you have, you'll have seen that there's huge potential for using Flourish. I've listed just a few examples here. So we have research students, so maybe sort of completing a thesis or a dissertation, and there's a whole range of different activities that go into that around milestones and around progressing through to different stages. And it could be very much that, for example, a supervisor could be using it with their research students, and the supervisor is directing the activities for an individual or for a group of individuals. They can easily monitor the progress, but the students can own this as well and set their own meetings and conversations with supervisors who may or may not be locally based. They may be at a distance or not available all the time. Also, for managers in a workplace, it could be a valuable tool for staff within a workplace to use in order to record aspects of their appraisals and their objectives and their meeting notes. And the manager could use that to draw lots of information together and support their staff with their own personal development and feedback. And then finally in this example for coaches, and these could be sports coaches. And sports coaches would typically be developing programs of activities for their athletes and using that information to then refine the programs, to measure the levels of progress and start to have a dialogue with the athlete in order to support them better and guide them in terms of what is the best form of practice in the future. So finally, how does all of this information come together? And how is it that people are informed whenever there's any of these sort of activities and tasks defined within the system? Well, for most of the things, if not all of the things I should say, there will be email notifications that will go out to both sides of a group, so maybe a tutor and maybe a student. So the email notifications will go out and they will list what has happened in that particular maybe conversation, and also then give a hyperlink to allow the person to dive back into the system and start communication back with the person around the conversation or for the meeting or for the task. But there's also been introduced in PebblePad this screen that you see in front of you. So this is a home screen for PebblePad, and what it allows any user of PebblePad to have is the instant sort of notification of all the things that are necessary. So things that you need to know. So maybe a conversation has been started, or somebody has responded to your post, or that you've submitted a document, and this is just giving you confirmation of that. A whole load of different things can be included in things you need to know. But then there's things you need to do. So if you're a learner, this is useful because this tells you the activities that you need to complete or meetings you need to attend. But if you're a tutor or a supervisor or a manager, these are really useful because they can remind you when work has been submitted and that you have to now go in and provide some feedback on. And from here you can dive into the whole PebblePad system with a single click. Okay, so I've just reached the end of this very short introduction to the main features of Flourish. What I'm going to do now is go into the live system and just give a little sense of how it all fits together. Okay, so here we are in the live system. You can see in here just an example of some of the features here. So we have a workbook and we have a submission, and any of these you can click on, just get a little bit more information. But you can also click on any of these links to dive in to the actual entry itself and review it. And I've got down here an expanding list of all sorts of things. And here, for example, or somebody's commented on a conversation that's been started, somebody shared an asset with me, and a submission has been accepted. So a lot of different kinds of information can be stored here. I can also see things I last worked on, and up here I can search for items, and I can also look at all the things I've been working on down here. Oops. But let me just go into Flourish itself. So Flourish can be accessed either by clicking on one of the hyperlinks for one of the entries, or it can be available up here. It sits alongside our Pebble Plus and Atlas systems. Pebble Plus being the personal learning space, and Atlas, our active teaching, learning and assessment system. So I very much see Flourish as being that glue, that communication glue that binds the learning space with that more formal assessment space. But of course, it could work outside of that scheme. For example, in the workplace, where you may not have the learning environment and the assessment environment, you just want a good, solid communication space for yourself and your staff. So clicking on this now brings me into Flourish. And what I see in Flourish in front of me is always first my timeline. And this timeline records all of the different interactions that I have or are having with different people. And there can be lots of different people who are in different groups that I am a member of. So I can see down, first of all, down the left-hand side, these sort of notifications. I can see things that have happened in the last 30 days, and I can change that to different time scales. And I can click on any of these just to dive in and to see what's happening. So we just clicked on one at random. Okay, there's a meeting there with several people. If I go up to my timeline as well, I can look at a variety of different things. So I had a timeline of my own and upcoming items. But if we just dive into groups now, we can see the different ways that PebblePad and with Flourish, all of the different groups that I could be a member of. I have 3 examples in front of me now. So one is as a coach. I have an academic skills group and I have a student within my group. I have a tutor group and my role is as a tutor, and there are 2 people in this group, but there's 2 other tutors. And then in the third example, we have a medical tutor group, and I'm a mentor in this group, and we have another co-mentor, and we have a group of students. So what you can have are different one-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many arrangements with learners or with other individuals. And in this group section, you as a tutor or as a supervisor can review all of the interactions that are occurring. I mentioned earlier around the lead tutor role, and this would be a typical view perhaps that a lead tutor would have of all of the different tutor groups that may exist for a particular program. So there may be 5 of them or 10 of them, but they could see all of the interactions that are happening and be able to click on a link and go in and view some of the correspondence. So just to say briefly around some of these numbers that we can see in front of us, we can see highlights, and these are particular additions, particular little notes that a person may make against a piece of feedback or against a grade or a conversation. And these are items such as, if you receive a good piece of feedback, you might say, this is excellent, really worked hard for this, I must make a note of this in the future. That's something you've just highlighted for yourself. A flag could be something that a tutor could make against a student, and it would just be perhaps, a piece of coursework has come back that wasn't as good as usual, or grade has just appeared that's fantastic, and you just want to sort of put a little flag against it, and it's just a little note just to make sure that you're in tune with that person, and you can go in and view all of the flags against a person. So it's a nice way of just summarizing just some of the key features that you want to keep track of. And then alerts come through from our Atlas sort of e-submission and feedback system. And this is again against an individual student perhaps. And if a piece of coursework has come in and you just want to make a note against it, it can come through as an alert. And then finally, this activity is just the number of items that have been recorded by a person within the system. And that just gives an indication, as you can look down here, of the level of interaction into the system. So if I go into now to this person, my student account, John Student, I can have a look at that person's timeline, and it's show me up here that I'm viewing the profile of John Student as their mentor, and I've got this link that's appeared down here back to my group, so I can dive back, and I've got now their profile view, so I can see their description, I can see things that are happening in the next few days to that person, things that have happened. I can see that they're a member of other teams. I can see their timeline. And within their timeline, I can filter against all of these different criteria. So you get a sense of the richness of information that can be stored within here. But then for any of these items, I can also then maybe join in a conversation. Hopefully with something more meaningful than that, and just add it. And by doing that, an email will be sent out to each of the participants of that group and to any co-tutors. I can also, if I wish, start a meeting or post a thought or start a conversation. That's really very easy. So we can say exam follow-up meeting. Oh, chat. Get the idea. Okay, and I can choose, because I'm in this person's timeline, I can see automatically that this person is involved in the conversation, but I can also look up all the other people that I have a tutoring role with, and I can then select who I want to also join us in this conversation. And a new option has appeared now because there's more than one person. It says, do you want to start a single conversation and include all the invited people? So I could, if I leave this as it is, have a one-to-one meeting with each of these, and it will remain private, that conversation between each of them, which may be appropriate for exam results. But it could be a piece of formative work, a formative exam that's leading up towards a more important exam. So I might want to actually just have a single conversation and let everybody be involved. And there we go. So I've just started this conversation off. Just click on the timeline. Here we go. So it's appeared now. And an email notification would go out to all of these people. It would appear as an item in the home page. And here we can just start it off. And we can just type anything in there. And that will then appear as an update, and again, emails will be sent out. The final thing I just want to highlight in here is that if we go back into my timeline I can now see it a variety of different options, and this includes some of these features: the tasks, the milestones, and the pathways. And this is where you as a tutor can build up and structure a person's learning and development. So let's just go into task management. You can see straight away there's a few examples of tasks that I've created. Now the tasks, if we go look in one of the examples, can be maybe a Pebble Plus template or workbook that's been distributed. And you can see in here, this is a supervised learning event. And you can, so each of the people would be expected to complete this and then submit it back into the Flourish. But it could be that you allow them to add their own assets. In this case, they're not allowed, but you can, just when you're creating it, just tick a box and say yes, they're allowed to, in which case they could submit a Word document or a PowerPoint or some other document resource. And as we saw in the example earlier, we can then see some summary stats of who's completed, and also then look at the responses. Now here we have a distribution, so we can have multiple distributions potentially for a particular task. And this could be useful if you're doing it year on year to different cohorts, but it could be you do it at different parts in the year. So there's a variety of different ways that this could be applied. It could be applied to the same students or to different students. And you have this summary information here, and then you can just click on an entry, open it up, provide some feedback against an entry, and then start off some other conversation or meeting or a task. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this this video example of how Flourish works. I hope you found it useful. Please look out for more information on our PebblePad website, and also look out for our Twitter messages at PebblePad and our community website, which is community.pebblepad.co.uk. Thank you for listening.